Elisha's help to the school of the prophets. 2 Kings chapter 6. Whenever we get ready to have our meeting, I'm going to read from this passage that day because of what it is talking about here. 2 Kings chapter 6. If you read it, you got the feel that they realized they couldn't do what they needed to do in the building that they had, so they had to build another building. And so we got this idea coming up for us. And we'll just get right into this because it's I could connect it to the last one, but there's a picture in here that I'd like to pull out, and then it'll help us, I think, with the rest of the lesson that is here, and we'll draw from that a good message for ourselves, I believe. Okay, where did the sons of the prophets tell Elisha that they desired to go? To Jordan. And there's a lot of things that they would need there to build this building that they wanted. What did every man take along? So they had where they were at had good beams, had good the product that was growing there had good beam structures, and down at the Jordan had everything else to hold up those beams, basically. This sounds like a construction project. That's what we do when we sit down to figure a job. When I sit down to figure a job, I got to think about who has the best this, so I can order it from there, get the price from there, and who has the best this, so I can order it from there. And you got like 20 different places that you're trying to get bids from. Sometimes it's all at one place, which is really nice. But that ain't always the case. But everybody brought a beam with them. And at number 3, and one said, "Be, I pray thee, and go with thy servants." And he answered, "I will." So they want the prophet to go with them. And I've seen this in my life. There was times as I was growing in the Lord, I hated leaving the preacher. I wanted to be around him as much as possible because I learned things from him. And so you don't always get the preacher to go with you, do you? But the prophet was generally a single man that didn't have anything tying him down. And so he went with them to help them, to guide them in this building process. And number 4, what did they do when they came to Jordan? Cut down wood. What implement fell into the water?
The axe head.
The axe head had broken off of one of the axes. And this is the neat thing about this story. What was the concern? What was also a concern for the one that lost the axe head? It was borrowed. So you see an implement of God's character coming in here. It wasn't about his own thing. It was that it was somebody else's is what brought the concern. It's what made the word concern means with I forget now what, but it has to do with gosh, I keep wanting to say concern. With a concern, a concern for the loss of something, a lowering, oh, help me out here. Yeah, that's a good one. A loss of response, like you have not kept your word in something, and it lowers you. It makes you sad. Your countenance is fallen because of something you have done that's caused somebody else to hurt. That's where God's heart is. That's what makes him really listen to somebody when they are concerned about somebody else. The Bible says, Solomon in his wisdom said, God inclines his ear to people like that. When they come to him in prayer over the loss or the lostness of somebody or somebody else's problem, when it's not always about us. God inclined. What'd you say? I want to listen to this really closely here. You're concerned about somebody else? This is what inclining the ear means. You ever do that and see how much better you hear? Have you ever noticed that? I learned that in running dogs. And they get further and further away. You can do this and they come right back into hearing really well. And so God inclines his ear to that type of thing. And so this was his concern. It wasn't, I lost my axe head and I'm not going to look good to everybody in chopping this wood. It was borrowed. Somebody else's loss that he was concerned about. What did the man of God ask? Where fell it? You know what I'd say to that prophet? You're the prophet. You tell me where it's at. Just kidding, of course. But what did the iron do when the man of God cast the stick into the water? It swam. Now, I don't know what kind of stick this was. Have you ever heard of any kind of stick making metal float? No. That's why we know it's a picture. It's a type. It was a miraculous thing. It tells us a future story. And so I'm pretty sure I know what it is. Let's read number 9 real quick. Therefore said he, it up to thee, and he put out his and took it. Just different things have different symbolism in the Bible. Iron is used a lot as a picture of sin because it weighs you down. It's a heavy burden. And sticks are used a lot of times in symbol of the cross. The cross. And so that's what I believe this is really pointing us to, this picture that would come, this stick that was thrown in the water. Why would a story like this be in the Bible? Because that's all it says about it, and then it's over. But then it catapults the rest of the story. If you look at it like that, then you really get something out of it. But it shows that God cares for the smallest needs of his people when it has to do with loving your neighbor. When it has to do with loving, that's why Jesus said, if you pray in accordance with God's will, he will answer it. He will answer it. And we learn from the rest of his teachings what God's will is. To love thy neighbor as thyself. That's his will. And so when our prayers have to do with that, God's ear bends low. And so the stick, I said, represents the cross of Jesus, I believe. Bringing the lost that have that weight of sin to a state of spiritual resurrection. When the cross is thrown at it, it revives. And when the cross has done something for us and we take up that cross and follow Jesus, that we're throwing that cross at other people. That's why I don't get too upset about people that carry a cross around town, because if their attitude's right, it's a wonderful thing. There's a guy that was in St. James that would carry a cross around, but he'd carry little crosses in his pocket and he'd chuck them at cars as they go by. I went and met this guy. I went and got face to face with this guy. His motel room had a big, the picture was painted over like a church would be, it was like a, what do you call them, stained glass windows, and it said the real Church of Christ in his little motel room there. And I got in there, and spoke with him and found out that he was mad at God. Mad. His wife had died, and he didn't understand why. He was mad at God, and he was going to do everything he could to make everybody mad at God. Yeah. Now, he didn't reveal that to everybody. He would say, "You're going to burn in hell," and all these things. And so I so hope my visit with him helped him to see the light a little bit, but I don't know. He was very, very, there's a wall of partition up within him. He had the idea that if he followed God, that God would take care of him and make sure nothing ever happened to him and his wife. And that's not biblical. It can happen that way, and man, we should thank him for it. But sometimes God gets more glory out of your problems, whether it's health or wealth or whatever that you're struggling with. God gets more glory out of you giving God glory even though you don't have everything. And so that can happen. But this is the light that we're supposed to look at this story in, I believe. You couldn't get it just knowing the Old Testament. Now that we know the New Testament, the Old Testament comes alive. We see all these stories and what they meant. It's God showing his pictures of his son, how we would do with our children. Look, ain't they cute? Of course, we have the phone now that does it, but it's picture after picture after picture of a beautiful son and the thing that he does. So moving on, verse number 10, who warred against Israel? King of Syria. This was, would have been Ben-Hadad, I think. It doesn't name him in this, but in the time frame that this falls into. It doesn't name the king of Israel either, but because it's not about none of that. It's a whole different direction with this. Number 11. Was the man of God able to warn the king of Israel of the Syrians' counsel? Yes. Was Elisha able to save the king of Israel more than once? Yes. Whose heart was very troubled? Why was his heart troubled? Anybody know without looking?
His heart was troubled because he was worried about what was going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. He thought that somebody under him was telling his secrets. He thought somebody under him was not being loyal to him. What did the king of Syria ask his servants?
Will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel?
Yeah. Who's going and telling the king of Israel my secrets? Because every time I go after him, he goes and hides out in a cave, and I can't find him. Who of us is giving out the secret? Who knew that it was the prophet Elisha that gave his counsel to the king of Israel? One of his servants says, "We're all with you, but that prophet is revealing God's secret to people." The devil's mad at us today for revealing the gospel. The devil's mad at us. We got a bullseye on our back, unless you're not doing anything for God. If everything's just peachy in your life, nobody's ever against you. It would make me say, maybe the devil's not mad at me. If everything's always okay, I don't ever experience any downtime. Don't ever experience anybody getting upset with me. Maybe that's because I'm not out there, But we get people get upset with us for thinking like we do, for telling what we believe, don't they? They get upset with us about that. Let's keep going here. Where did the servant of the king of Syria say that Elisha was? Dothan. I don't know how he figured that out. Probably somebody in Israel gave it up. Somebody in Israel said, give me a little money, I'll tell you where he's at. Number 17. At what time of day did the Syrians compass the city of Dothan? Came by night. In the darkness. What encouraging words did Elisha say when his servants saw the bands of Syrians all around?
Fear not, that they be with us are more than they that be with them.
Yeah. Didn't Jesus say something like that? Do you remember that? He that is within us is greater than he that is in the world, being the God of this world. And though we can't see it, like God miraculously showed this guy, we can have the faith enough to know in our spiritual life that's what's taking place. If we're following it, if we walk in the light, then that's what's taking place all around us. And we're doing it ourselves. We're putting these roadblocks in our way. We're keeping ourselves from going certain places that we used to go. We have a standard now. Our standard has changed. And when we quit consulting the book, our standards go away. And that's when the problems can come in worse than ever. Different kind of problems then. Number 19. What did the servant see after Elisha prayed for him?
The mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha.
The mountain was full. And see, we're supposed to see that at all times. We know that's what's on our side. If we're living of faith, if we're walking in faith. We've been talking about that on Wednesday night. Abraham walked in faith even though he made mistakes. God was not angry with him because he was doing it in faith. And if we're in faith, even though we make mistakes and we don't do everything just right, we learn from those mistakes. And as we go through life, eventually we see that narrow path a lot clearer than when we started. And we're able to draw others into that narrow path as well. What did Elisha pray concerning the Syrians coming down to him?
Smite this peoples, I pray thee,
with blindness. A true spirit of the prophet is to not want to kill and destroy, but just do something a little bit here so that we can give them a good lesson. I remember one story, I can't remember where it's at right now, but the prophets got together with the men of Succoth and whipped them with whips. Just like we would do our kids, give them. And it said, with the whips, they taught them.
Did they make them
taught
cut their own
them.
switch?
I don't know. But these people of Succoth had done some really rotten things, bad things that would normally bring death to them. But the prophets got together at that time and whipped them with these whips and taught them. And so that's the spirit of a prophet. A prophet was the representation of God on earth. Now, it ended up sometimes having to be wrath poured out, but it's the last resort, the very last, out of love for those that were doing right. You see, we're not supposed to be pacifists. If you're walking down the street and some girl's getting raped or something, or just beat up, then it's on like Donkey Kong. Get busy, or your children or or anything being hurt.
You're not supposed to stand there with your phone and videotape
Look,
it.
I know the reason that's coming up is because so many people do that today. In these cities, people are being mauled right in front of them, and they just keep walking. That's nuts. That's nuts. The character of God says, you take care of that. You get even though there's danger, you take care of that. And so, I'm not a pacifist. I mean, I believe in love and compassion as our default. But when it comes to, we know when it's needed. I think we got a pretty good idea when the gloves need to come off.
When somebody says something about my wife.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No.
Well, and it would be anybody.
Just words.
It should be anybody being taken advantage of in some way. We should come out for somebody that's being taken advantage of in a business deal. You know, that's God's character there. And there's ways to do it, you know, that's not so aggressive, but sometimes we have to be aggressive even. But Elisha prayed that they'd be smitten with blindness because he had a plan. He had a plan to show them something. And it stems from the first story there. You know, this should be our goal. Let's see. I got a plan here where I'm going to get the gospel in that house. How am I going to get the gospel in that person that hates me? You know, you sit down, you make a plan. You figure out what's going to bring this to pass. How am I going to get the gospel into that neighbor that cut my tree down, thought it was on his property? You know, or how do I work this out to where I can get the gospel in there instead of, you took my tree, you know, or something. I don't know why that came up, but anyway. We cut this guy, he thought we cut his tree down back here when we when we done our fence the first time, I believe it was. But we're actually 5 foot over on our property. So we didn't cut their tree down, but they thought we did. But where did Elisha lead the Syrians? To Samaria. So he had a plan. They were all blind and they're still trying to fight because in that culture, if you abandoned your post, no matter what was wrong with you, you got killed. So they were still trying to fight, though they were blind. And so Elisha disguises himself, probably disguises his voice somehow, and says, "You're in the wrong place. I'll lead you to where to go." And so he led them over to Samaria because he had a plan. What did Elisha then pray concerning the Syrians? Yeah, open their eyes up right here, right where I've led them. What did the king of Israel ask Elisha? Should I smite them? What did Elisha instruct to be set before the Syrians? Bread and water. So not let's smite them, let's bless them. They probably haven't eaten in days. A lot of times that's what took place. You remember when David's men went and ate the bread of the altar? Remember that? Yeah. And it wasn't a sin. But so this is Elisha's desire was to show care and love, a soft answer, which turneth away wrath. And this is what happened. Did the bands of Syria come any more into the land of Israel? No. No. You talk about a good story. It talks about what happens when you love your enemies. They don't come back to that turf. Now I know in the end, there's probably going to be no matter what you do, because then it's all out. Devil's here, his wrath is on, and we need to be faithful unto the death, when that all takes place. But in general, especially in a land that we're in, that's still pretty free everywhere, this is good for us. Love your enemies. And man, they'll start thinking something different. You know, it heaps coals of fire upon their head. They can't sleep at night. What in the world? Why did they do that for me? I was nothing but ornery to them. I hated them, and I tried to pull out every stop. I wanted to see them, their true nature, and they still loved me. Why? They can't sleep at night. Heap coals of fire upon their head. You can imagine what that would be like in the reality. You know, you would be trying to get away from fire, you know, so you're tossing and you're turning. Why? They would lose sleep over the fact that you loved them. That's the story. Love your enemies. A soft answer turns away wrath. The cross of Christ reminds us to love our enemies and the reward that comes from it. They don't come back on that turf. Resist the devil. And what happens? He will flee. That's all telling the same story. Resist the devil. Control your emotions. Spit out what God would want you to, not what your heart is telling you to. And you'll see the reward. Hope this has been a blessing. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this. Give us a good week of maybe just thinking about this, the cross of Christ and what it has done for us, and help us to throw that out for others.